Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson and Nick Whalen here. Today we are doing ADP battles between 2 or 3 or 4 players at the same spot. You may not say none of the above. You must choose the one that we are talking about here. It's none of this, I'm not going to take a player in that position. No cop-outs. We're going to do the battle here on all these players. Our podcast is brought to you by the good folks from Circa, from Renegade Fantasy, and Fantrax. We are on the BlueWire network. Go check out RotoWire. You can get a 10% discount on any RotoWire subscription just by using promo code YouTube15. Implore you to check that out. Again, new set of RotoWire roundtable rankings out there. You can see how I resolve those battles, how Jim Coventry resolves those battles, Jerry Donabedian, Mario Puig, as well as our consensus. Nick Whalen, we got to get you in those. Instead, we'll make you do it here instead. Let's get right off to it here. This is inspired by the whole segment. Was Kenneth Walker versus TreyVeon Henderson, rising like just super helium in a lot of ADP right now, especially over at the NFFC. And we are using the NFFC's ADP. I'm going to share that screen with everybody here. You guys can see what we're using there. It's fantastic stuff there in terms of their ADP tool. But that particular battle, what do you got? Kenneth Walker versus TreyVeon Henderson.
So I don't know what date parameters you're using for your ADP. I'm looking at just the last week. So we're recording this on Tuesday, August 12th. So this is August 5th through August 12th. TreyVeon Henderson, now your RB18, going about pick 49 on average. I would imagine if you shrink that and just do it since the kick return heard around the world over the weekend, we might see him going even higher. But yeah, this is an interesting one. I mean, you could go TreyVeon Henderson versus Alvin Kamara versus even James Cook, although I do think we'll see his ADP rise a bit in light of him returning to the practice field. I to be honest, Jeff, I would love to start this by saying I'm not drafting either of these guys, but word on the street is that is not an option. We're getting into uncomfortable territory here with TreyVeon Henderson because I think the Patriots are still interested in making Ramondre Stevenson part of this backfield. The question is, could TreyVeon Henderson play well enough early on that, we have this year's Zach Moss, Chase Brown, where, they would like it to be a 2-back system, but one back is just so clearly better than the other that 3 or 4 weeks into the year, they just have to ditch that. I think that is a reasonable outcome. I do think TreyVeon Henderson is significantly more explosive than Stevenson. I think it's possible that Stevenson's fumble issues could resurface from last year and he could essentially play his way out of the job. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of patience on that front from Mike Vrabel. I've been out on Kenneth Walker, so you're putting me in a tough spot here as far as Henderson probably being a little overvalued right now, Walker being somebody that I've stayed away from. I just worry so much about the injuries with Kenneth Walker, even the inefficiency behind what was a pretty bad offensive line last year. Like, for the most part, when he was healthy, the volume was there, but there were just so many of these high volume, low yardage type of games. I've been more impressed, honestly, with Zach Charbonnet when he's been out there. Not that Kenneth Walker doesn't run hard or anything, but there's something a little bit more physical about Charbonnet, and I do worry about him encroaching on that workload. So, man, if we're talking both these guys are on the board, let's say at pick 45, I think I might lean TreyVeon Henderson, Jeff. I'm feeling like I'm overpaying, but it's more so that I'm just really not all that interested in Kenneth Walker.
I get that. I want Kenneth Walker to happen. He was so explosive in his rookie year, but the explosive runs have declined each season. The injuries have increased. The competition is there. I don't fear Ramondre Stevenson versus Henderson. I understand he exists. Very few running backs are going to be pure workhorse backs. I'm also citing the NFFC's ADP, and that means it's a full point PPR league, which helps Henderson as well. Right. So I would resolve that in favor of Henderson, and I didn't have that way earlier this year. I've since changed that. What do you got for me for my first one to resolve?
All right. Well, I'm going to throw you a player on your own team. So we're going to have to, take off the Carl Pickens jersey, take off the tiger striped hat. Jaxon Smith-Njigba versus T. Higgins. You got to pick one of them. You're on the clock. Who are you going with?
I just submitted my RotoWire roundtable rankings. You can check that out at rotowire.com. I have T. Higgins at 29 and Jaxon at 30. So T. Higgins barely is that much of a coin flip for me, and not just ADP. It's a combination of factors. One, I think that Jaxon might be cannibalized a little bit by the addition of Cooper Kupp, another slot receiver. JSN does his best work from the slot. I worry about Cooper Kupp taking away maybe some of those opportunities where he's lining up there. I think that Seattle lacks a reliable outside receiver. I think they're trying to manifest a few players that happen, and it could work out that way eventually. I don't think they're there yet. I don't, and in particular, you're looking at the rookie out of Colorado State, Torrey Horton is the guy that might fill that role. MVS is really the only other option that can line up outside, but he's more of a decoy than anything else. The occasional deep ball where the teams fall asleep on him a little bit. It's not someone that can be a regular target on the outside. They need someone that's an actual threat. So as much as I was high on Smith-Njigba earlier, and I still am, I mean, it's one spot below. T. Higgins, I understand the volume concerns with T. Higgins, that in the durability concerns with him. He was playing for a contract the last 2 years. He was played under the franchise tag. I think that encouraged him to sit out whenever there was something that was even a little bit marginal injury wise. T. Higgins is the ball winner. He's the guy that goes out and wins contested catches. I think you might even see a spike in red zone targets for T. Higgins this year. He is so good in the red zone, Nick, that I think that's the sort of thing that gives him a little bit of a higher ceiling. All the pieces are in place for the Bengals offense to be just a highly functioning, prolific offense. I like that they're playing their starters in the preseason. I think they'll be ready from the word go this year. And I think that will contribute a little bit more. I think you're going to see some a career year out of T. Higgins. I like that third round price on him. I'm going to go T. Higgins over JSN. It is close.
Yeah, the health history for T. Higgins is probably what worries me most. If you could guarantee me that both guys played 17 games, I think the upside is actually higher for T. Higgins, despite the fact that he's still somehow the clear number 2 in his own offense. But you look at the per game production last year, and he was about 4 fantasy points better than Jaxon Smith-Njigba on the year. Now that gap closed, later in the season when we saw JSN really start to come on. But I think the one thing we haven't really mentioned here is the discrepancy in quarterback play, right? Like we could talk about target competition, but T. Higgins is in maybe the most fantasy-friendly offense in the NFL. There's a reason that Higgins, Chase Brown, Joe Burrow are all top 40 picks in a lot of drafts. And there's a reason that Cooper Kupp is going around pick 100 and nobody's drafting Sam Darnold unless you're in a deeper super flex format. I think there's a very good chance that Sam Darnold does not play nearly at the level that he did through the fantasy season last year. And I think that's something that'll be part of the equation as well. So these are both players that I really like. Again, I worry about the health history with Higgins. 12 games last year, 12 games the year before. He's missed at least 1 game each of the last 4 seasons. He does claim that he's working on injury prevention this offseason, but we'll see if that comes to fruition. Maybe he's due for a healthier season. But I could see this being a situation, Jeff, where on aggregate, JSN ends up with more fantasy points, but much like last year, T. Higgins is the better per game guy.
This podcast is brought to you by Circa. Circa Million and Circa Survivor are back with a massive $21 million in guaranteed prizes. Circa Million, pick 5 games against the spread each week, 18 weeks of action with 126 ways to win. $1 million for the winner and $6 million guaranteed. Circa Survivor, 1 pick a week, no point spread, lasts the longest to win it all. At least $15 million guaranteed. Enter in Nevada, play from anywhere. $21 million guaranteed. Visit circasports.com for details. We're doing ADP battles today. These players are listed either consecutively or near each other at the NFFC. And Nick, you are back on the clock with our next ADP battle. It is Ladd McConkey versus Garrett Wilson at the end of the second round for a wide receiver. Who do you got?
Man, I like this one a lot. I mean, 2 completely different situations, 2 completely different quarterbacks when you're talking about Justin Herbert and Justin Fields. I've been clicking on Garrett Wilson more often. So that's going to be my answer. I think Garrett Wilson is the better player of the 2. Certainly it should be I think Ladd McConkey would say on paper is in a better situation just because he's playing with, a pass first quarterback as opposed to Justin Fields in Herbert. But I worry about the touchdown potential for McConkey, a guy that did not see a ton of red zone targets last season. Chargers were a very run heavy team in the red zone. If they are going to throw it, now you have another option there in Keenan Allen. Not super high on Keenan Allen as far as, what his fantasy potential will be this season. But if he is going to have splash weeks, it's going to be kind of like we saw last year where they come in bunches and he's getting 1 or 2 touchdowns. And I think that does take away from Ladd McConkey. There's just no competition whatsoever in New York right now in that wide receiver room. There's not a ton for the Chargers either, but I have no idea who the Jets' second receiver is. Like that is a really sad battle playing out right now in training camp. I guess it's Josh Reynolds by default. Allen Lazard is in that mix, but he's going to miss a couple of weeks now with a shoulder injury, and then you're into some of these retread, barely on the roster type of players. I do think the Jets are going to be very, very run heavy, much like we saw with Justin Fields early in the season in Pittsburgh. George Pickens got off to a rough start in that environment, but I think Garrett Wilson is a more diverse receiver than George Pickens. I think he's still going to find ways to make an impact. And Fields has shown us that he can support one decent fantasy receiver. I don't think he can go beyond that. He's not going to be asked to do that for the Jets. So with that pick, I'm shooting for what I view as a little bit more upside. McConkey, to me, the much safer pick here, but I'll go with the more talented player in Wilson.
Yeah, I think there's second receiver issues with the Chargers too, and now you've got Rashawn Slater's injury. Trying to protect Justin Herbert. That might hurt McConkey a little bit. Might be a little spillover effect on there. I do have Wilson over Ladd McConkey, actually over AJ Brown too. Although the reports on Justin Fields struggling a little bit in the Jets offense in training camp does concern me a little bit. Nick, hit me up. What's your next one?
All right, we are sticking with the receiver who I just mentioned here, George Pickens versus Devonta Smith.
All right, and I had a similar one for you where I included Smith versus Waddle and Zay Flowers. So we're going to put all four of them together here on this one here. This is omnibus. And that's okay. So, hey, this is a key spot. Sometimes this is your second receiver. Sometimes this is your third receiver. And I think that question in and of itself kind of dictates the answer a little bit there. If this is my third receiver, I'm swinging for the fences. I'm going for George Pickens. And I'm assuming I don't have CD Lamb at this point in time. I'm not going to go both Lamb and Pickens unless I really, really feel I'm jonesing for the stack and go and Pickens, Lamb, and Dak. But I don't know if I want to go all out, especially with the Dallas Cowboys offensive line issues there. But Pickens is tailor-made for Dak Prescott. He's a ball winner on the outside. I use that phrase again, and I'll probably try to avoid overusing that phrase, but he wins contested catches all the time on the outside. CD Lamb does his best work on the inside. I think they pair very well together. I think Dallas is going to be trailing a lot. They're going to be airing it out. I don't think the run game is very good. Jaden Blue is a little banged up even right now, just to add a little bit more uncertainty to that run game a little bit. The Dallas secondary is in shambles. I think this is going to be a shootout team. I think it's very much like the Bengals. It's so funny. We made the parallel about how the Bengals and the Cowboys operate at the same way. I also think that's true in turn. I think their personnel match is very similar as well. So yeah, especially if I'm going for upside, I'm going for Pickens. I think if I'm going for floor, I go Devonta Smith. But that's just the thing. And it's not like I have a strong take between the two. It really is about, okay, if it's my second receiver, I need floor. If I've gone two running backs at this point in time, I need Devonta Smith because Pickens could have a 750-yard season and be playing for peanuts next year. Or he could go off and be getting a 4-year deal worth a Boku money there. It's really kind of there. Now, I included Waddle and Flowers because they were going close to each other on the list, but it really is Pickens versus Devonta. I guess it was unnecessary to add these other two because I don't think I'm ever taking Waddle or Flowers in either rubric. So it was just wide receiver bloat by me to add them in the first place.
Yeah, we could kind of address that one separately, I guess. So Pickens versus Smith, I think you broke that down well. It depends on your build. It depends on your risk tolerance. I still think Devonta Smith is, arguably the safest receiver in fantasy, probably the safest receiver in his zone. Just a very narrow range of outcomes, right? There's not a high ceiling, but there's also a very high floor. With Pickens, it's almost hard to evaluate this Dallas team. You can't really take much from last season. I will say that they did struggle with Dak healthy, played almost half of the year, didn't really look like the same offense from 2 years ago when they were lighting it up. But if you look at Dak Prescott's last two fully healthy seasons, the Cowboys ranked second and third in total passing yards. And even last year with Dak missing more than half of the year, they were 11th in yards. They were third in total attempts. I don't expect that running game to be a whole lot better. The offensive line, like you said, is somewhat of a concern, but to me, that's just going to lead to plenty of shootouts as long as they could keep Dak healthy. The big thing with Pickens is I think we're going to see pretty serious touchdown progression. I don't use the term positive regression. I don't really understand why that has been popularized. I'm just going to say progression because that's what it is. You look at the advanced numbers for him last year, finished with only 3 touchdowns. Expected touchdowns came in somewhere between 7 or 8, right? And didn't even have his first touchdown until Russell Wilson took over midseason from Justin Fields. So, we need to be realistic, I think, about the ceiling for George Pickens. Like, I don't know that he has a T. Higgins in Cincinnati type of ceiling, maybe a junior version of that, playing alongside CeeDee Lamb, unless Lamb goes down, there's really only so much Pickens can do. But I think the touchdown potential for him in Dallas is what really makes him appealing. And then to answer the next one, Flowers versus Waddle, kind of a similar equation in some ways. But to me, there are so many variables with the Miami Dolphins and with Waddle. It's like you not only need him to stay healthy, you need the most injury-prone quarterback in the NFL to stay healthy. We saw that offense completely fall off a cliff when Tua was out midway through last year. Waddle's had now 2 straight disappointing years. He was really good the first 2 seasons. It's just a question of, are you a believer in the Miami Dolphins? Like, do you think this team is going to be decent, or do you think this could be a disaster? I tend to lean more toward the latter. I guess there is a world in which, the Tyreek Hill situation blows up and either he gets hurt or there's an off-field issue or he demands a trade. Like, all of those to me are real possibilities. And, maybe in that last scenario or with Hill hurt, Jaylen Waddle sees more targets, but it feels like a lot of things have to go right for the Dolphins to make Jaylen Waddle, a top 20, top 25 receiver like he was a few years ago.
Yeah. Circling back to the Cowboys real quick. Clayton Adams is now the offensive coordinator. Brian Schottenheimer is the head coach.
Yep.
Brian Schottenheimer has been an OC before where he leaned heavily on first down runs a lot. Do you have some concern about that permutation happening in Dallas? Adams was a offensive line coach at Arizona before.
Yeah.
They were kind of run first on first down a lot in Arizona last year too. Does this kind of quell some of your enthusiasm for Pickens or any other Dallas pass catcher?
I think it has to a little bit just because we haven't seen it yet. And, we had such a proven track record as far as what to expect under Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore. So it doesn't feel like a positive, but at the same time, I mean, there's the idea of running it effectively, and then you have to actually go execute it. And with this offensive line, with this group of running backs, they could say they want to run the ball. I think they're going to be forced out of that more often than not. And, I was actually running some comparisons on Pickens, against some of these players the other day. I mean, Dallas threw the ball almost 9 more times per game than the Steelers did last season. So even if you expect like a slight reduction in that number, I still think volume wise, this is going to be a better situation on balance.
I do agree with you on that one there. Our podcast is brought to you by Renegade Fantasy. Fantasy football players, aren't you tired of your top players getting injured or not performing well? Lucky for you, RotoWire has teamed up with Renegade Fantasy, the only fantasy football app where you can sub in a player in real time. This means no more stress, no more points lost to injuries or even poor performance. With the Renegade Fantasy app, you can step down from the luxury box and become a real-time coach. Join the RotoWire League on the Renegade Fantasy app today. Go to rotowire.com or go to rotowire.renegadefantasy.com to claim your free entry into the RotoWire League today. Again, that's rotowire.renegadefantasy.com. Get that free entry into the RotoWire League. Thanks to Renegade Fantasy for joining us on this podcast. Our next ADP battle. Nick, let's go with Chase Brown versus Bucky Irving in the second round. Who do you have?
Love both of these players. Absolutely love both of these guys. This is a difficult choice because I'm interested in both. I think I would click on Bucky Irving more often than I would Chase Brown. I think there's just slightly higher upside with Irving. Both of these guys kind of do similar things. Both should catch a ton of passes, but Rachaad White is already banged up. Maybe he makes it back for week 1. He's going to be a factor when he's healthy, but Liam Cohen is a guy that likes to use multiple running backs, and Bucky Irving was so good down the stretch last season that he basically forced him out of that. And I don't think you can put that genie back in the bottle, right? I think everybody knows Bucky Irving is the guy. So I do think there's going to be, maybe a little bit more separation, a little bit more upside for him because Chase Brown has to contend, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, getting so much work in that passing game. The Bengals say they want Chase Brown more involved, but that's easier said than done. That means you're maybe taking some targets away from 2 of the best receivers in the NFL. Now, the counter to that, of course, Jeff, is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have maybe the deepest wide receiver room in the NFL, and Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, Emeka Egbuka. So, I think both guys are in offenses that are so good that it almost harms them in some ways because you have so many great options around them. But I think to me, Bucky Irving is a slightly more explosive player, a little bit more talented overall. He's the guy that I think can still jump up another level. Like, unless Chase Brown really increases the number of catches, which again, the Bengals have said that's the plan. We'll see if they execute that. I still lean Bucky Irving, but this one is really, really close. I mean, there's a reason that they're separated by like a 10th of a pick right now at the NFFC.
Yeah, absolutely. I have Brown one spot ahead of Irving. So again, razor thin margin there. Taylor over both for me. Josh Jacobs over both for me, by the way. Although in a PPR league, it's a tougher call. Full point PPR is tougher than in a half point. We're having this discussion on air today, by the way. The definition of standard versus what is a standard league these days? Standard is at least half point PPR, if not full PPR. I think if you go to like Yahoo or ESPN, their basic league is a half point PPR league. Not too many people play no PPR at all anymore.
No, I mean, almost every league I play in now is PPR. Every now and then you'll run into a standard league. I feel like half PPR is almost the most rare for me, at least in the leagues that I play in. Yeah. So, if we are going to rebrand, what is a standard league? I think in the modern fantasy world, that is PPR, full PPR.
It could be. I have I don't think I have any more leagues where you get zero PPR anymore. I just don't think that happens. Thus I think standard might be a misnomer, but anyways, that's just it's my sidebar for the day. Probably not my only one. All right. What's your next job battle for me, Nick?
All right. Well, we got some interesting ones to pick from here. Where do we want to go? How about this one, Jeff? We'll stick with running backs, early running backs. Achane versus Derrick Henry.
Good one. We were just discussing that in the chat a little bit there. I like Derrick Henry in this one, but it's close. Alexander Mattison, who is thought maybe to be the goal line back for the Dolphins, out for the season with a neck injury. Possibly never plays again. They said it's not career ending, but he's also kind of on the fringe right now anyhow. So that's a tough break for Mattison, but I don't know if the Dolphins maybe Ollie Gordon is that goal line back now, but maybe Achane just gets more of those goal line touches. Lots of touches last year. The Dolphins are looking to go with more of a quick release offense, even quicker than before. I think that behooves Achane a little bit. And yet I think there's so much variance in his projection. If I'm drafting at that 1-2 turn, I'm probably embracing the security of Derrick Henry, who we know has that certain floor. There's been like 1 year where he hasn't achieved that floor in terms of the rushing yards and touchdowns that go with it. They made a point of unlocking Derrick Henry, that, the way they had the way they had the personnel on the field, including Ricard at fullback. The life was better for this offense. It was better for Henry when they made those changes. They're going to continue to do that because that works for the Baltimore Ravens. Derrick Henry is older. I get that. He's also a freak. There is no other back that's remotely comparable to Derrick Henry. Not even remotely. I love freaks, by the way. I love guys that are so unusual that they break the mold of what is normal for a speed and weight combo, skill set combo, you name it. He's, Henry won't get more than 20 catches this year, but 2 of those will be like big plays because it won't be seen coming. That's the beautiful thing about Derrick Henry. You're going to get a couple of those big, splash plays too on the running side. Plus he gets those breakaway runs. He had just as many breakaway runs last year as he's had in recent years, if not more. He gets that Ravens offensive line. Give me Derrick Henry. It's a pretty easy decision for me on this one here.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's an easy decision, but I lean Henry as well. These guys are such different players, different points in their career, completely different builds, completely different ways that they accrue fantasy points. Like I certainly understand the Achane argument, but the Achane thing just ties into what we talked about with Miami, right? It just, I want to invest. If you're looking for a tiebreaker between these two players, like, all right, give me the Ravens offense, give me the Ravens infrastructure over that of the Miami Dolphins, which just feels like it's crumbling right now. And, Devon Achane, like we're talking about Derrick Henry just being a freak and an Iron Man. Devon Achane stayed healthy last year. That was a huge question mark coming into the 2024 season that I don't know that we can just, sweep that under the rug and say, okay, he's going to hold up for a full season and be healthy going forward. At the same time, we do need to acknowledge that Derrick Henry will turn 32 during the playoffs. Like all running backs have a timetable, and at some point, Father Time is going to come for him. I don't think it's happening this year. He's a guy who, said he spends $1 million a year on his body. There's a reason that he's still as effective as he is at this point. I think there's one more elite year left in Derrick Henry. I will take the safety of the guy who's finished in the top 5 at his position in 5 of the last 6 years. I think he's arguably in the best situation of any running back in the NFL. It's right there with Saquon Barkley in Philly. You can make a case maybe for Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit, but Gibbs is, sharing carries with Montgomery. That offensive line won't be as good this season. And, normally when a guy scores 16 touchdowns, Jeff, I would say, there's no way that's happening again. I think it's totally replicable. I really do. I mean, is Lamar going to throw 41 touchdowns again? Probably not. I think if anything, we could see even more of Derrick Henry in the red zone.
Exactly. By the way, I rechecked my rankings. It's closer than I'm giving credit. Okay. I have Henry at 13 and Achane at 15. I have Henry over Ashton Genty too, for what it's worth.
Same.
And not everybody does. ADP doesn't have it that way. Although some of that is even shifting as much as well. Counterpoint to my initial argument. I mean, Achane was really good, even with he didn't have the ridiculous 7.8 yards per carry, because of course he didn't. He doubled his number of carries. So of course you're going to have some tougher runs. And we know about the circumstances in Miami, but also just so many targets. I mean, 78 catches last year, 87 targets. Not as much boom as you'd think on those targets. 7.8 yards per, I think that's per target. No, it's per reception. I'm sorry. But still, yards per target was more like 6.8. Still very good, but not as much as, not crazy as you think. He's also 23. The Miami offensive line is also the other issue there too. And that's the other kind of deciding factor for me. They're Taron Armstrong had retired at left tackle. Austin Jackson is retired at right. I mean, is hurt at right tackle right now. We'll see if he's ready for week 1. They're optimistic he is. They traded up to draft their left guard, Isiah. And so we'll see how that works out. I don't trust this Miami offensive line as much as I trust Baltimore. So I'm kind of re-endorsing your back the organizational play here a little bit. Let's talk a little more. Let's do another one here before we get you another timeout. Let's talk quarterbacks. We haven't talked a whole lot of quarterbacks yet. I'm going to go straight to the top. I'm going to keep on rising to the top here. Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. Who do you got?
Oh boy, I did not expect this one to be on the card. So, I mean, Lamar ended up outpacing Josh Allen by about 3 fantasy points per game last year. You'll see a big difference in terms of the total fantasy points. Lamar gave you 23 in week 18. Josh Allen, I think he took like 1 snap, and that just to keep a streak alive. So Lamar was certainly the better player last year. If I'm taking an early quarterback and both are on the board, I think I lean Josh Allen this time around. We talk a lot about James Cook and the touchdown regression. Mm-hmm. I don't know that all those are just going to end up in the hands of Ray Davis. I think, we could see more out of Josh Allen, the runner. I know the Bills are kind of stuck between needing Josh Allen to be Josh Allen and also wanting to preserve him during the regular season. But I thought he left some touchdowns on the table, to be honest, last season. I think we should hopefully expect more out of the pass catchers for Buffalo. I mean, it's kind of amazing how efficient and effective Josh Allen was last year without anything in the way of a true number one. Disappointing season from Dalton Kincaid. What you're getting in Khalil Shakir. You would expect a step forward, I would hope, from Keon Coleman this year. We'll see if they get anything out of Josh Palmer. I mean, it's not like they made some sort of splashy, no doubt addition. This guy's our number one receiver, but I think you can expect more of that group relative to last season. And I mean, the other thing is it's just really tough to repeat as the number one guy at your position year over year. I mean, there's no reason to think that Lamar Jackson won't be Lamar Jackson this season, but at the same time, I don't think he's throwing 41 touchdowns again. Maybe he makes up for some of that with more rushing.
Right.
But if we like Derrick Henry, we know he's going to be a big part of the mix. I think there's a little bit more there for me with Josh Allen this year. So I will bank on some passing regression from Lamar Jackson and go with Josh Allen.
Robert Goldman, I believe, is in your Beat Nick Whalen draft, which is going to be tonight, Tuesday night. Are you taking either in the 3rd round? He asked.
I will tell you, Robert, that is not the plan right now. I have had to pivot many, many times in these situations. Mm-hmm. And, if I feel like I'm going to be up against it at receiver or running back, and I want to feel like I have an advantage at another position, maybe. I could tell you I did not plan on taking an early quarterback last year in the NFFC and ended up taking Lamar in the third round, and it worked out pretty well. Paired him with Bijan and Saquon Barkley. So will I get that lucky again? Probably not. To be honest, no, I'm not planning on going early quarterback, but we can't rule it out.
Yeah, you're picking ninth, so it's third round reversal, so 3.4 also. Chances are one of those receivers that you like or one of those running backs that you like will be there. So or your man George Kittle.
It's tough to pass on Trevor Lawrence in the 12th round, I mean, how it's just too much value on the table.
Exactly right. We're brought to you by Fantrax. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had or features that are missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules or playoffs, deeper team settings? Well, look no further because we have you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Fantrax even offers college fantasy football leagues. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league, invite your friends, and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty fantasy football platform in the industry. RotoWire does commissioner league, college commissioner leagues. We've done dynasty baseball leagues there. We love Fantrax. They're great. Fantrax is running a special promotion you don't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire today to enter for your chance to win a signed Jamar Chase jersey. Again, fantrax.com/RotoWire. Just create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, we're also on the Blue Wire Network. Quickly, here are their ads. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to Blue Wire. We're doing ADP battles. Nick, what do you got for me next?
All right, we are going back to the wide receiver position, Jeff, and I want to make sure I get the ADPs right here. I am looking at the last week at the NFFC, and I do think, one of these ADPs specifically will be changing in the next couple of days. But as of right now, they're going pick 74 and 78, respectively. Wide receiver 38, wide receiver 39. I will give you Ricky Pearsall or Stefon Diggs.
I'm glad you asked me this one here because Pearsall is someone who I've recently bumped in my rankings. And all you have to do is take a quick perusal at the Niners depth chart. You can go do so over at rotowire.com if you want. Promo code YouTube15, and you'll see a sea of red marking. We just got news that Brandon Ayuk is out until at least week 6. They're hopeful that he returns around week 6 against the Bucks, but it's not guaranteed either. Juwan Jennings has been missing all sorts of practice in camp with a calf/payroll issue. You look at Jacob Cowings is hurt. The rookie just got hurt the other day. They are thin at wide receiver. And I know you've got George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey eating up targets, but you got to have somebody on the outside as well. Pearsall showed some really good signs late. I really like Ricky Pearsall. And the funny thing is, Nick, I don't have any of them yet. I'm probably going to make a point of getting him. I've got him at 68 overall. I've got him over Rome Odunze, Travis Hunter, Juwan Jennings. That's a recent flip-flop over Debo, over a number of people, including Diggs. Diggs, to me, is a little bit lower. I know the reports on Stefon Diggs have been good so far. I don't trust older receivers coming off of major injuries like his. The torn ACL, I just don't really trust Diggs. And, I thought there were signs of decline in his last year in Buffalo. He was fine before he got hurt in Houston last year. I can find another receiver to click on here. So I'm going to go Pearsall, and I'm going to pretty much do it a full rounds different, if not more.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see Pearsall rise, in light of the Ayuk news specifically. I'm still not really sure what to expect with Juwan Jennings. He was back practicing with the team, and then he had the calf injury. I don't know if he's backed away at all on the trade demand. If I was the Niners, I wouldn't be really entertaining that in the first place. But, I mean, Ricky Pearsall, to me, is now very clearly the guy. Even if you don't love him as a player, he has by far the fewest red flags of any receiver in this team. And, the Niners have an easy schedule. Most people are in on Brock Purdy. It can't just be Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle. There's certainly room for one or two wide receivers to have really nice years. And I mean, we're ultimately talking right now, at least wide receiver 38 for Ricky Pearsall. So we're not asking for the moon here in terms of what the upside is. Like, it should be to me, pretty easy for him to give you a nice ROI on that as long as he stays relatively healthy. So right now it's pretty easily Pearsall for me. This one looked better when I wrote it out yesterday before we got the Brandon Ayuk update, but
right.
I've come around on the idea of Stefon Diggs. If you're a believer in the Patriots, if you think that Drake May, can really ascend and kind of have that big second year trajectory, he's not going to do it without Stefon Diggs. There's not enough else around him in that wide receiver room. They don't really have a tight end that you're fired up about. Like those two to me kind of go hand in hand. But again, like you said, 32-year-old wide receiver in November coming off a torn ACL, not a guy that you necessarily trust off the field either. There are some red flags, I think, with Stefon Diggs that just aren't there with Pearsall.
You mentioned the Niners schedule too. Not a lot of elite corners in there. I mean, no. Seattle's corners are okay. Saints, nothing to worry about there. Cardinals, nothing to worry about there. Jaguars, maybe. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see how Travis Hunter, will he be, he's listed as second on the corner on the depth chart, but I don't buy that. I think he's going to be on there in key situations. The Rams corners don't really scare me. The Bucks corners don't really scare me. They do get the Texans way deep into the season. Okay, now there's the corner that does scare me, but we're talking like week eight or nine here at that point in time. Yeah, give me Pearsall. I like him quite a bit. I want more Pearsall in my life. All right, let's do another wide receiver pairing here. Courtland Sutton, Denver Broncos, just got paid. DK Metcalf, Steelers, just got paid. Ooh. And maybe we can throw in Ted McMillan in there as well. You and I both had separate questions on Ted McMillan, so let's include him too.
Yeah, these are good ones. Again, last week at the NFFC, this is pulling in, all NFFC drafts. They all have ADPs around pick 47 point something for all three of those players. Courtland Sutton is somebody that I was initially not all that interested in. Kind of a boring type of player. You think of the Broncos, like, oh, they want to run the ball a ton. But the more I think about it, man, the more I'm coming around on this Broncos team overall. And of course, that has to involve Courtland Sutton. Slow start to the year for Sutton, still finished as the wide receiver 15 overall. But, his takeoff over the second half of the season coincided with Bo Nix, kind of really coming into his own as a more comfortable quarterback. From week 8 on, Courtland Sutton was wide receiver 7. He had more fantasy points than Lad McConkey, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors in that span. Is he going to sustain that kind of pace the entire season? We're talking like 18 fantasy points per game in PPR. Probably not. But we're talking about a guy who's going as a wide receiver 21 at the NFFC. And I think there's enough wiggle room here that, even if he kind of meets in the middle between his second half and his first half, he's still probably finishing in that wide receiver 13 to 17 range, which I think at that point in the draft, you're totally fine with. There's also the possibility that Bo Nix does take a major step forward. And, Sean Payton has had nothing but praise for Bo Nix. And I think that does mean something. He's not going to throw him under the bus, but Sean Payton doesn't just hand out praise all willy-nilly. Like you could tell internally, they are really, really high on what this team can be. The big concern for me, that the change year over year is that you do have Evan Ingram to be a high target guy at tight end. You didn't really have anything like that a year ago, but there's still not a ton of competition overall in that wide receiver room. So as you could probably tell, I'm now leaning Courtland Sutton over DK Metcalf. I don't think I would have said that a month ago. But at risk of me just like running out of breath here, Jeff, I'll let you take the McMillan part of this.
Breathe. I love Ted McMillan. I thought that was a great draft pick by the Panthers. It's exactly what they needed. I need more before I'm going to pump him up into this level. I've got both Metcalf and Sutton comfortably ahead of Ted, and I've moved Ted up a little bit lately. I'm on DK Metcalf here, and I know I'm such an Aaron Rodgers hater that this kind of shocked me a little bit there. I saw the damage he wrought on the Jets last year, but he is a lock on one receiver type of guy. And my goodness, there is only one wide receiver to lock on. You're going to see, Arthur Smith want to push the tight ends a little bit more, and that will happen a little bit. But I think DK Metcalf is going to be a target monster. He runs the type of routes that Rodgers wants to throw. I think this is a good pairing, and I really like that. As much as I love Courtland Sutton, I think he's underdrafted. I think he's underappreciated in general fantasy circles because he's had so many lousy quarterbacks over the years. But I'm going to go Metcalf over Sutton and both over Tet. Maybe it's the ghost of Marvin Harrison hovering over me here. That I just need to see it from Tet before I push him up into that sphere. I'd much prefer him in like the end of the fourth, beginning of the fifth. That might not get him. We saw a couple of nice plays in that preseason game against the Browns. I think the preseason is dangerous in that respect. That we see that, oh my God, Shedeur Sanders, he cooked. Okay, he made a couple of nice throws. Yeah, we'll see what happens when he's going up again. When JC Horn, the equivalent of JC Horn's out there as opposed to his replacement too. So I made this a Sanders comment when we were talking about Ted. So shame on me for sidebarring again. But point is, I think that I don't want to get too excited about seeing some preseason production there. Give me Metcalf. It is close.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I am a McMillan guy. Didn't love the landing spot necessarily in Carolina. I think believing in him certainly requires some level of belief in Bryce Young. But again, it's another one of those wide receiver rooms where there's not a whole lot else there. I think the targets will be there certainly for McMillan. It's just tough to look at some of the more proven options, like guys we really like in Metcalf and Sutton, and take that leap on a guy that we just haven't seen yet.
Exactly. I got time for one more quick one here. DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Isiah Pacheco. RB's 22, 23, 24. Pacheco goes actually about 6 picks later, but I think he's in that same conversation. What say you, Nick Whalen?
This is Pacheco for me pretty easily. And, I will recognize that there are certainly some faults in Pacheco's game. You absolutely worry about the injury from last year, but I don't think he ever should have come back. I mean, Andy Reid even said that after the Super Bowl. Like, yeah, most running backs would not have even pushed to return at any point last season. And I feel like the way that he looked at the end of last year, we're still kind of carrying that over and remembering that. He didn't look good. I'll give you that. But if you're not in Isiah Pacheco, like, who are you in on in Kansas City? Like, there's not an obvious number two. I think the Kareem Hunt thing, for whatever reason, they love him, but it's run its course. We've had too many 13 for 32 type of games out of him. Like, if you think the Chiefs are going to storm back offensively and put up a ton of points and spend more time in the red zone, I think Isiah Pacheco is a huge part of that. I'm a believer in this Chiefs team. Hot take alert. Yeah, the Chiefs are going to be good. I think Isiah Pacheco, to me, is still really undervalued. Like, he's risen over the last month or two, but you're getting a no doubt RB1, still much later than he should go in a draft.
And he goes cheaper than the other two alternatives and Montgomery and Swift here. I don't mind taking Swift in this range. I think the Bears didn't do much to improve their running back room. Rashawn Johnson is already banged up a little bit. But then again, I mean, there's too much tape out there of Swift running into blockers too. So, I mean, it's tough. Actually, Pacheco's just as guilty of that at times too, but I think he's actually stronger. I think he does a better job here. So anyways, I thought I'd throw in one more quick one there. You've got a VEASAN appearance coming up. So we will sign off here on ADP Battles. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Go check out RotoWire. Check out the latest RotoWire roundtable rankings. YouTube 15 is the promo code. Gets you 15% off any RotoWire subscription. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.